Shalom, everybody. Welcome to this week's Journey Through Torah. This week, we start a new book. New book of Shemot is Exodus. Now, why is it called Shemot? The Hebrew name of this book is Shemot, which means names, which is kind of odd. If we say, okay, we're going to open the book of Exodus, okay, well, we have an idea. This book is about the Exodus of the people of Israel coming out of Mitzrayim, right? The Exodus out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt. But if that's the focus of this book, then when they came out of Egypt, the book would be over. But it's not by any means. There's so much more of the book that happens after they came out of Mitzrayim. So what's really going on here? Now, the Hebrew name of this book is Shemot, which means names. And then it lists names of people who were in Mitzrayim. Well, what's the point of all this? Well, there's a lot to be said here. One, other than just establishing the fact of who Israel was, and they were there, and the circumstances of how they became to be there. We know the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis, closed out with the Hebrew people being in Mitzrayim and becoming a great people there, right? Yosef was this bridge between there, but then at the end of Bereshit, Yosef dies. And so now we're moving the focus from Yosef into a people called Israel. Now, what happens here is, in this book, God is revealing his character to his people. Okay, the book of Shemot, it's about names, but what is Shem? Shem, it's name. Shem is name. One of the names that's given for Yahweh is Hashem, which means the name. But what is a name? It's not just what you call somebody. Shem, it's also testified of someone's character, of who somebody really is. Even the word neshama, which is sometimes translated as soul, it's got the word Shem there in it. So the core of who you are is what you are called. Your character is revealed in your name. We even say a good name, meaning reputation, right? Person's character. Well, here in this book, we find the character of Yahweh being shown to the people of Israel. And we start off with the people of Israel in Mitzrayim, and they become enslaved. They become a people of bondage. And a lot of things we see in here. One, we have pictures of us in here. We were in bondage. We were in slavery. We were sold to sin. We were in bondage. We owed a debt we could not pay, and we could not free ourselves from it. But Yahweh intervenes and delivers us. And as we go through this book, you're going to see many parallels and foreshadows regarding Yeshua in different areas. And one of the things we see is Moshe, he's a deliverer for the people of Israel, but also some things that we see in his life and some things that happen, we can also point forward and testify to Yeshua the same way, same throughout the entirety of all the Tanakh. It all points back to him, right? So in this book, we're focusing not just on them coming out of Egypt, okay? In this book, we're focusing on Yahweh is the one who redeems his people, and he is the one who reveals himself to us and then asks us to walk with him in the promises that he has established for us. Redemption is an underlying theme of this whole book. Throughout this book, we see redemption, and we think redemption is this one-time event, right? Well, I redeemed you right here. Well, redemption is more than that, and we'll cover that probably next week. But there's many aspects of redemption, and it's not just a one-time you've been redeemed, done process. It's you've been redeemed, but now you need to walk accordingly. You've been redeemed, but now we walk with him in that. And that's this daily process. I mean, yes, if he redeems you, you're his, right? Scripture says he whom the Son sets free is free indeed. So you don't have to worry about that, living your life. Oh my goodness, if I slip or if I mess up, what's going to happen to me? No, search Yahweh and follow him. But understand the act of redemption, it's not just one thing that we think of. Like I said, we'll probably cover that a little bit next week. But the theme of redemption runs through the book of Shemot. Okay? I mean, you were oppressed. Yahweh freed you with a mighty hand. Signs, wonders, and miracles. The fact that he intervened, signs, wonders, and miracles. The fact that he renews you, signs, wonders, and miracles. All of this. He brought you across the sea. That's a mikvah. That's what we would call baptism, right? That's a mikvah. Then he says, come to me. That was Sinai. He said, come to me, and he revealed his heart to his people, the ones whom he had redeemed. And then he says, learn my ways, learn my heart, learn these things that I desire to walk with you and to show you how to walk with me. That was his Torah. And then he says, I want you to dwell with me, build me a mishkan, prepare a place for me to dwell with you, because I don't want to I don't want you to picture just me here on this mountain. I want to go with you wherever you are and to dwell in the very heart of you. So you're going to carry my presence with you wherever you go. In other words, within you. Later in the book, we'll get to that. And then the idea is, and I will take you to the promise that I have told you about. So a lot of things we see here in this book is a book full of redemption and what that means for us in our life. And then we have a picture of someone who is to portray a redeemer. Now, Yahweh is the one who redeems, but Moshe is the one whom he had used to be a deliverer for the people of Israel. And there's some interesting parallels that we see here. One, when Moshe was born, they didn't know where a redeemer would come from, whether a redeemer would come from the Egyptians or the Hebrews, but they said there was a redeemer coming, so he cast all the children of a certain age into all the boys of a certain age into the river. And there's a lot more to be said about that, not going into all that. But the interesting thing here is when he told him to cast the children into the river from Pharaoh, it was all the children. It wasn't just the boys. It was all the children. And then we find later an example of Herod doing a similar thing, all the boys being killed. So the idea is there is a deliverer coming. We don't know where this deliverer is going to be coming from. So we're going to try to cut it off at the source. And it didn't work, did it? No, because Moshe was put into the water, into a basket, and found by Moshe's sister, found by Moshe's sister. And then she took it to Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter said, oh, look, a Hebrew child. How would she know he was a Hebrew child? Okay, you can pretty much bet Moshe was circumcised. That's how she would have known. And he was flying down this river coming at him, and Moshe's sister Miriam comes and says, look, here's this child. So what is she going to do with this child? She drew him out of the water, named him Moshe, which Moshe means to draw out. And so again, there's kind of a prophetic imagery there, not just drew him out of the water, but he is the one who would draw the people out of Mitzrayim as well. But then she raises him. And that's an interesting thing. I mean, Moshe knew he was Hebrew, but he was raised as by the daughter of Pharaoh. So he would have been a prince, trained by the Egyptians, trained and studied in their halls, and he would have been raised in this manner. But he knew he was Hebrew. And so we have these pictures here of someone who was a prince in the palaces of the world, right? And we have like this idea here, like it's showing again something that happened with like Joseph. So Joseph, he was this prince in the world, but yet it's not who you think it is. He's actually Hebrew. And Joseph knew he was Hebrew, but everyone else, when they came to him, no, he looked different, right? We see more of this imagery going on for the first 40 years of Moshe's life. And then at a certain age, about 40 years old, what happens? Okay, so we start to get into some issues here, like Moshe as a deliverer, a prince, or a shepherd. What is he? And really, he was all three at different points in his life. So what happens here? Moshe as a deliverer, he kind of wants to take this on his own, and he tries to act on his own when he does this. In Exodus 2, let's go to verses 11 to 14. One day when Moshe was a grown man, he went out to visit his kinsmen, and he watched them struggling at forced labor, and he saw an Egyptian strike a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. We read in Acts 7:23, where it says, when he was 40 years old, he thought to come to visit his brothers, the people of Israel. So this is interesting because, again, he knew the Hebrew people were his kinsmen. He knew this was his people. And so he decided to go out to visit his kinsmen. We don't know why. We don't know if he was actually knew who his family was out there, what was going on, or we don't know all of this in the backstory. But he knew he was Hebrew, but he was raised as an Egyptian. So to the world, everyone else, he looked Egyptian, but yet he knew he was Hebrew. And it's a while before that distinction changes. So verse 12. So he looks this way and that way. When he saw no one was around, he killed the Egyptian and he hid his body in the sand. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrew men fighting with each other. To the one in the wrong, he said, "Why are you hitting your companion?" And he retorted, "Who appointed you ruler and judge over us? Do you intend to kill me the way you killed the Egyptian?" And Moshe became frightened. Clearly, he thought this matter's become known. So interesting. He tried to deliver a brother, and we don't know truly if his intent was to kill the Egyptian or if he just wanted him to stop what he was doing. We don't know. We're not told. All we know is he attacked him, and the Egyptian died. And so now he what does he do? He goes, he hides the body, buries it, and now he goes to his brothers the next day and says, "Why are you guys fighting?" He says, "Oh, you intend to kill me the way you killed the Egyptian? You don't rule over us. You don't speak for us," right? So now he's like, "Wait a minute, I thought no one was looking. I thought no one was going on." And he was just trying to do what he thought in his eyes was right. He wanted to deliver his brother, right? Hmm. Again, down to things when we try to do things in our own way, in our own strength, and it doesn't work out, right? But he had within himself the mind that he just knew within he's I can deliver this brother, and in a manner of speaking, he did. But he had to pay a price for it because he didn't do it in a way that was right, in a way that was proper. And at this point, Yahweh has not told him to do that. But you kind of feel from this idea right here that Moshe had within himself that this was right, and that this kind of foreshadows what is to come. We read in Ecclesiastes 7:8-10 says, "The end of something is better than its beginning, so the patient are better than the proud. Don't be quick to get angry, for only fools nurse anger. And then don't ask why the old days were better than now, because that is a foolish question." Again, the idea is submitting to Yahweh. Maybe there is something that we can do differently instead of a quick reaction to something. I know sometimes you have to act quick. There's no option, but sometimes, other times, we need to stop and say, "Yahweh, what do you want me to do? What is the best course of action that you desire for me to take?" Right? James 1:19-20 says, "Therefore, my dear brothers, let every person be quick to listen, but slow to speak and slow to get angry. For a person's anger does not accomplish God's righteousness." And we see later on when Moshe was very frustrated and upset with the people of Israel when they're moaning, groaning, and complaining to him, saying they're going to die of thirst, and Moses, "Give us water right now." And he strikes the rock. And it says he was angry. He was upset with the people of Israel. And his anger caused him to strike the rock instead of speaking to the rock as Yahweh had told him to do. So again, we see Moshe was very much human, and we learn lessons from those who go before us, right? So what happens next? Moshe, he obviously is scared. And what's the penalty for killing an Egyptian, right? Well, this is a death penalty, right? So what's he going to do? Well, he flees out into the wilderness. He ends up in a place called Midian. And this is not like you see in the movies, guys, where Pharaoh sends him out and banishes him to the desert. Nope, didn't happen that way. Moshe was scared of being found out and being brought to trial, right? So he flees. We see this Exodus 2:15. So when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled their troughs to water their father's flock. And shepherds came and drove them away, but Moshe stood up and helped them and watered their flock. Now, interesting, here we see in this story right here, there's more things that come out. First off, Yitro's daughters. The daughters were tending the flock, and then the shepherds were there. The shepherds that were gathering around the well. I mean, let's face it, you didn't get water just everywhere, right? So there was a well, and the shepherds would come drive Yitro's daughters away so that they could water their own flock. And so this idea, again, driving away the one who would ultimately be one would be a bride to the deliverer, the people of Israel. It's a little bit of a reach, but again, if we're just drawing imagery here, you can kind of see how some of these things can look and fit. And the shepherds of this place, they tried to cast out the one who would ultimately be a bride. Ezekiel 34:2, we read, "Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, Thus says the Lord God unto the shepherds, Woe be to the shepherds of Israel that do feed themselves, but should not the shepherds feed the flocks." So there was a flock that was already there, and they were to be watered, but they drove them away so they could take care of themselves and their own needs and what they wanted. They wanted the good, clear water for themselves, and then After that, after the water's all muddied up and been tracked through, and after all the troughs and everything are done there, then they'll let the other half, whatever, right? Again, not the way that we should be. Ezekiel 34:18 and 19 says, "Is it not enough for you to feed on the good pasture that you must tread down with your feet the rest of your pasture, and to drink of clear water that you must muddy the rest of the water with your feet? And must my sheep eat what you have trodden with your feet and drink what you have muddied with your feet?" Again, are we looking after the flock? Are we looking after the ones whom are entrusted to the shepherd? Does the shepherd truly care about the flock, or is the shepherd just trying to tend to their own things? Is this just a matter of business, or does he actually care about what's being done here? Now, Moshe, he stands up and he saves the people, the daughters, from these other shepherds, and we see a few things here as well. As he stood up and he saved them and he watered the flock. So here's one who was the deliverer, who would be the deliverer, who stands up and comes against these shepherds who are not acting properly. And the word kum means to stand up or to rise. Also, it used in relationship to resurrection. And he saved them. That's Yasha, the same we get the root for Yeshua. And then he watered. Vayashech means to give their portion. He gave them their portion of water, and the Aleph Taf flock. So again, just imagery, just some pictures of things that we can see, kind of foreshadows of Yeshua as the good shepherd who would rise and give the flock their portion, the one who would rise and make sure that the sheep had the water that they needed, right? Their deliverer, they stood up and they gave them water. And Yitro's daughters go and they declare, "An Egyptian delivered us. An Egyptian saved us." Was he really Egyptian? No, he was Hebrew, but he was raised Egyptian. In other words, he was clothed as an Egyptian. He looked like an Egyptian. And so when those who testified of the one who delivered them, they said, "An Egyptian delivered us." And so Moshe knew he was Hebrew. And ultimately, there's a time coming when this comes out, when he goes back to be the deliverer. But yet, as he's standing up here, we again have a similar thing to Yosef and to Moshe here, someone who was in Mitzrayim, but yet was Hebrew, a matter of identity being concealed, with later to be revealed, something that's a constant throughout the Torah, right? Okay, even you picture somewhat Yeshua today. Over the years, many people have pictured Yeshua in many different ways, many different shapes and forms. He's been portrayed in many things. But guess what, guys? Yeshua was from Israel. He was from line of the tribe of Judah. He was from Judah, and he was a Jew. So again, are we trying to paint him up and picture him in ways that he isn't, or are we truly just trying to follow him in the ways that he has declared for us? Right? Again, more food for thought as we go on and continue. So back to Exodus 2, verse 21. So Moshe was content to dwell with this man, Yitro, and he gave Moshe Zipporah, his daughter, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, "I have been a stranger in a strange land." Gershom means to dwell as a stranger. Ger means stranger, and Shem means character or name. There's that word Shemot again, right? Names. So a stranger and character and name, these two words together, is Gershom, to dwell as a stranger or someone whose character was unknown. He said, "I've been a stranger in a strange land. I'm not from here. I wasn't raised here, but here I am, and this is where I'm at." And then we go back to Genesis 15:13, just as another side note that this is part of the fulfilling the promises from Yahweh to the people of Israel. But he said to Abraham, "Know of surety that your seed will be a stranger, Ger. They shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them for 400 years. So Moshe was part of this people, and he's testifying, "I will be a stranger in a strange land." And I'm sure he was thinking in the land of Midian, but yet this could also be testified of the people of Israel, where Gershom in Mitzrayim as well. So we have a picture of Moshe being a good shepherd. He laid down his life to tend to the flock. He looked out for the benefit of others, right? At the time he did this, he didn't even know Yitro's daughters. He just knew that this was not right what they were doing. He stood up. He warded off those that would cause harm to the sheep and those that were looking after them. And he led the way to good waters, good pasture, and he provided and protected for them. And then he was repaid for these things. So what happens in Moshe's life next? Well, he sought to deliver someone, he killed someone, and that was just absolutely the wrong way to go about things, right? So he had to go through some things himself, much like Joseph had to go through some things himself. He had to experience a time of wilderness, right? Joseph told his brothers, "It is not you who sent me here, it is Yahweh who sent me here. And the things that I have experienced and things that I've gone through while I've been here, Yahweh has been with me through all of these things." So these are all the things that had to happen to put him in the place where he was. So Moshe had to experience some things in his life too. He went out to the wilderness, he'd experienced this wilderness. He had to learn how to shepherd. I mean, he didn't learn how to shepherd in Egypt, but he had the heart. So he had to learn how to actually shepherd. And then he had to go to the mountain. He had to get the call from Yahweh. Then he had to return to Mitzrayim and then come back to this mountain with all Israel. There were some things that Moshe had to experience for him to fulfill what Yahweh was calling him to do. And it's not just theoretical. He had to actually go through and experience these things in his life. And the time had come for these things to take place and come to happen. Exodus 2:23 says, sometime during these many years, the king of Egypt died, but the people of Israel still groaned under the yoke of slavery, and they cried out, and their cry for rescue of slavery came up to God. One of the things that we see in this is adversity brings unity. It can. The word for tribulation is tsar, which means a tight place or being pushed together, right? So in a time of tribulation, it's a time of pressing. These are the time that people of Yahweh should move close together and to help each other out, right? In the time of pressing, and then they cried out to Yahweh, right? So it says God heard their groaning, and God remembered. There's Vayiskor is the word therefore, and God remembered. Now, this doesn't mean that God forgot. It says that Yahweh remembered his covenant with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and God saw the people of Israel, and God acknowledged them. So it's not that he forgot about them, or he forgot about the covenant, or forgot about the promises, or anything like that. This word, Vayiskor, Zakar, it's used there, means to act upon something. Kind of like the word we get from memorial. Well, when you have a memorial of something, it is something that is established so that what had happened stands currently in our minds. So when it says that God remembered, it means that God is going to act according to that which he has established. It's like a memorial. It is something that is set in front of us according to what has been said. We see in Psalm 34:15-17, it says, the eyes of Yahweh are upon the righteous, and the ears are open to his cry. And the face of Yahweh is against them that do evil, to cut off the remembrance of them from the earth. The righteous cry, and Yahweh hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. So the time has now come for the covenant of Yahweh to be revealed to the world, and the people are crying out to Yahweh. They're not just moaning, groaning, and complaining. They're crying out to Yahweh, and Yahweh says the time has now come when they're all crying out together, and they're turning their faces towards him. They're crying out, and Yahweh saying, now is the time for me to come and to be this deliverer for the people. And this is when Moshe is called. So Exodus 3, verses 1 and 2. So Moshe was keeping the flock of Yitro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the farthest end of the wilderness and came to the mountain of God unto Horeb. And the angel of Yahweh appeared to him in the flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. All right. So first off, there's this place of Horeb, also called Sinai, that we see later. It's the same place. And we testify of this and a little bit later. I'm going to show you in just a few minutes. But yet, what got his attention is he saw this bush, this fire, this flame. He saw this burning, and the bush was not consumed. There was just this fire. It just wasn't going away. And so he turned aside to go this way, right? Okay, couple things here. When it says the bush burned with fire and it wasn't consumed, we see in Deuteronomy 33:16, says, in the favor of him who lived in the burning bush, may blessing come on the head of Yosef or on the brow of the prince among his brothers. So he says to live is shechan. Shechan. So shechan is the same root as mishkan. Mishkan is the tabernacle. And also where we get the word Shekinah, which you may have heard Shekinah, right? Shekinah is the dwelling presence of Yahweh. So Mishkan is a place for Yahweh to dwell. So what we see here, this bush, it's the favor of him who dwells. The presence of Yahweh is what we're talking about. So was it like fire, or was the fire the presence of Yahweh? Was the fire his glory? Was the fire what he was seeing there was just what was surrounding Yahweh in the midst of that? Exodus 3:4. So when Adonai saw he had gone over to see, Elohim called out to him, Vayikra, from the middle of the bush. So he calls out Vayikra, which is how the book of Leviticus starts. He cries out to him to draw near to him, and Moshe draws out from everything else and goes toward Yahweh. So Moshe is drawn out and called out of Egypt for the purpose of being a deliverer, is what we see is happening here. So he turns aside. What happened if Moshe wouldn't have turned aside? Well, that's just it. We need to turn aside of what we're doing to turn to the presence of Yahweh, to turn towards him. James puts it this way. James 4:8 says, come close to God and he will come close to you. Clean your hands, sinners, and purify your hearts, double-minded. See, that's the thing, guys. If we listen for him, Yahweh is speaking. See, Yahweh doesn't cease talking. It's not that his word isn't being established, not that his word isn't being called out to us, but yet are we turning aside to hear him? And he calls out to you for the purpose of deliverance, right? He wants to deliver you. He wants to draw you to himself, and he wants you to be his people set apart from all the other people of the world and to be a light to those around you, right? You have a purpose. And when he calls you out, are we going to follow him? Much like Yeshua, follow me. How many people did he say, follow me, that didn't? I wonder. We do have some recorded where they testified, Yeshua, I'll follow you wherever you go. And Yeshua said, well, let's see, the foxes have holes. I got nothing. You still gonna follow me? And we don't see in the scripture that man followed him anymore. But he said, I'll follow you wherever you go. Yeshua said, what if I'm not going to a specific place? You still going to follow me? And he didn't. And then at that same time frame, he turns to another one and says, follow me. And he's like, oh, no, I couldn't possibly do that right now. Again, when Yahweh calls us, are we going to follow him, or are we going to try to find ways around just being obedient to what Yahweh is asking us to do? Things to consider, but Moses was no different. Moses did the same thing. Because Yahweh called out to Moshe, and Moshe tried making excuses, right? Yahweh, who am I to deliver the people, right? But understand, if Yahweh calls you to something, he will equip you for that, right? And then it's okay, so you say you want me to be a deliverer to the people of Israel. I tried that already, and it didn't work. Okay, but you tried it the way that you thought you should do it. You didn't seek me first, right? So again, maybe we need to just turn ourselves to Yahweh, submit to him, learn his ways, and let him lead us, instead of just doing the way that we think we should, right? And then it's like, well, I don't know what words to speak. Well, again, don't speak your words. Don't worry about the words that you think you're going to speak. Don't rehearse them ahead of time. Don't speak what you think. Speak what I give you. And again, that's just a matter of coming to trust Yahweh. And so ultimately he comes back to says, okay, well, here's this. I'm going to give you a sign so that you know this is done, right? But it's interesting how he puts it. In Exodus 3:12, he says, so I will surely be with you, and your sign that I have sent you will be when you have led the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. What? So you don't even get the sign that he sent you until after it's already done and you come back here with the people? Now that takes a massive amount of faith, doesn't it? But he said that is the sign, because the sign wasn't just for Moshe. The sign was for the people of Israel as well, and all those that would follow, even up to today. Okay. We see in Isaiah 2:2-3, it says, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations will flow to it. And many people will go and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. So again, we will all ultimately go to the mountain to meet Yahweh and sit at his feet to hear his voice and let him teach us. And when he does that, our responsibility is to heed the call and to listen and to walk with him. So Moshe, he goes, he's supposed to be this deliverer. And we think, okay, so first automatically he goes right to Pharaoh, right? No, not exactly. Okay. Before he goes to Pharaoh, he first meets with the elders in Israel. You know that when they were in Mitzrayim, they had elders that were there. They had some leadership that was in there. It's just difficult to be a leader when you're being oppressed, right? But they did have leadership within Israel. See, in Exodus 3:18, he says, they will heed what you say, and you will come, and you and the leaders of Israel, before the king of Egypt, and you will tell him. Adonai, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Now please let us go 3 days' journey into the desert so we can sacrifice to Adonai our God. Again, interesting. The initial thing that they were asking for was that they could go 3 days into the wilderness so that they could sacrifice to Yahweh. Why 3 days? Because that was what they were doing. They're supposed to come back to this mountain and worship Yahweh, make offerings and sacrifices right here in this place. But yet we knew Pharaoh was not going to let them do this, right? Which he doesn't. But this was what they were asking for. Not let us go so that we can go to this place, Israel. That wasn't the immediate call. The immediate call was to come out to be with Yahweh, to be a people of his presence and to dwell with him and to have that festival with him, which that festival ended up being Shavuot. So Exodus 4. So Moshe answers and says, behold, they won't believe me or hearken to my voice, for they will say, Yahweh has not appeared to you. And Yahweh says to him, what is that in your hand? And he says, a rod. Interesting. The word rod, mate, also means staff or a rod or a tribe. So literally he says, okay, so take this rod and I'm going to use what is in your hand to do this. But another way of putting this is I'm putting the rods, the staff, the tribes in your hands. You're going to lead them and I'm going to put them in your hands and you will direct them and they will follow. He makes some prophetic statements to Moshe here as well. In Exodus 4:8, says, it will come to pass, if they do not believe you, neither hearken to the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the latter sign. And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe these two signs, neither hearken to your voice, that you will take water of the river, pour it on dry land, and the water which you take out of the river shall become blood upon the dry land. Interesting things here. So if they won't believe the first sign they were given, what was the first sign? The Torah. The Torah. It's showing this first sign that is to be given. The voice of the second sign we were given is the prophets. So if they will not listen to the Torah of the prophets, what happens next? Now, again, even this we see in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, where the rich man died and hell, he lifted up his eyes and he said, please send someone of my brothers. If someone comes back from the dead, they'll listen. And I believe this is, testifying of Yeshua coming back from the dead, right? So he said, if someone comes back from the dead, they'll listen. And then Avram says to him, no, they have Moses and the prophets. Let him heed him. Let him heed them. And so again, this is the voice of the signs that we were given. The voices we were told to listen to is the Torah and the prophets, all of which Yeshua said testify of him. On the road to Emmaus, when he revealed himself to these two men, it says he started with Moses and the prophets and opened up the scriptures to them to reveal the Messiah to them, to reveal who he was before he actually revealed who he was. So if they don't listen to the voice of these two signs, these first two signs, then they will heed the third sign. What was the third sign? Take water from the river, and then it will be blood on the ground. So water from the river is the water of life. The water, and so what do we know as the living water? That's Yeshua, picture of the living water. And so the living water flowing to the ground, and it's blood. A couple things here. John 19:34 says, one of the soldiers with the spear pierced his side, and then out came blood and water. Matthew 27:54, when the centurions saw that they were with him watching Yeshua, they saw the earthquake and those things that were done, and they feared greatly, saying, truly, this was the Son of God. When they pierced him, I don't know if you've read the account of what would have happened at a crucifixion, but there should not have been enough water in his system to flow at all, let alone how much blood would have been left in his body by now from everything that he had been through. But when they pierced him, it says blood and water flowed, which I believe is a prophetic picture that he is the one who washes you, makes you clean, redeems you, provides atonement, and makes a way for you to come into the very presence of Yahweh. All pictures of what's being done here. Exodus 4:12. So now, therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and I will teach you what to say. But he replied, please, Lord, send someone else, anyone else you want. At this point, Adonai's anger blazed up against Moshe, and he said, don't you have a brother, Aaron the Levi? I know he is a good speaker. In fact, here he is now coming out to meet you, and he'll be happy to see you. Man, there's a lot going on here. He says, go with you, and I will be your mouth, and I will teach you what to say. And Moshe says, please, anyone else that you want. Okay, but Moshe, he's telling you. What do you mean? And pick anyone you want. He's picking you, and you're telling him no. So what's going on? And so Adonai's anger blazes up against him, and he says, okay, you have a brother, Aaron, right? Okay, Yahweh knows what's going to happen here. He knew Moshe. He knew what was going on. Matter of fact, he even sent Aaron 3 days ago, before this time even happened, Aaron had to start making this journey, you know? So he says, okay, your brother's coming at you. Look, there he is. Um, this wasn't like an automatic thing. He would have had to have started this beforehand. So Yahweh spoke to Aaron and told him to go out and where to go. It's not like they had a phone, hey, in 3 days, Moshe calls up Aaron, in 3 days, I'm going to be at this mountain. There's going to be some amazing things. Come meet me there. I mean, no, not at all. He had to go and talk to Aaron and tell him and lead him to this place so that when this time came, even the time of day that was there, when this time came, Aaron and Moshe were to meet there. Now, some other interesting things that happen here. He says in verse 15, you will speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and his, teaching you both what to do. Thus he will be your spokesman to the people. In effect, for you, he will be a mouth, and for him, you will be like God. So a couple interesting things here. One, Yahweh says, I will teach you what to say. Now, again, that's a matter of the Ruach within all of us, teaching us what Yahweh is desiring for us. And he says, I will teach you what to say. Okay, well, again, he's showing us what to do there. But yet, Aaron is going to be do a lot of this talking, which if you read through when they go before Pharaoh, most of the time, Aaron is the one who's doing the talking. Not all the time. Most of the time, Aaron is the one who's doing all the talking. And so as they come before him, what Yahweh is saying to Moshe is, Moshe, I'm going to put my words in your mouth. You are going to put the words in Aaron's mouth, and Aaron is going to speak on your behalf. Okay? And so again, we see pictures of this. Consider Yeshua talking to his Talmidim, Yeshua talking to his disciples in Mark 13, 10 and 11. It says, the good news must first be proclaimed to all the nations. When they arrest you and hand you over, do not worry beforehand about what to say. Say whatever is given to you in that hour, for it is not you who speaks, but the Ruach HaKodesh. Again, Yahweh is letting us know that he will speak through you when the time comes that he needs to speak through you. It doesn't mean that we don't study. It doesn't mean that we don't discern. It doesn't mean that we don't read, that we don't seek the heart of the Father. But it does mean that if we yield to him, he can speak through you. He can tell you what to say. He can put his words in your mouth. And so understand it's not our ways we're doing. It's his ways, his words that we're testifying of if we just submit to him. And again, Matthew 28, 18 to 20, Yeshua to his Talmidim, Yeshua came up to them and he spoke to them saying, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, immersing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Ruach HaKodesh, teaching them to observe all I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Again, just follow him. Doesn't say there's going to be an easy road. Doesn't say life is going to be without hardship. It just means that he will be with you, and don't worry about the events. Just continue to follow and trust. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, so if anyone is in the Messiah, he is a new creation. The old things have passed away, and behold, all things have become new. Proverbs 23:7 says, for as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So again, where is our focus? Are we focusing on the old ways, yesterdays, and what used to be? Or after Yahweh has called you and said, I will put my words in your mouth. In other words, he's saying he's going to put his breath in us, his spirit in us. And are we going to walk according to that? Are we going to live according to that? Or are we going to live according to well, I tried this and it didn't work. Well, I did that and it didn't work. Or I did these other things. And no, are we going to dwell in the past? Or are we going to continue to move forward with what Yahweh is telling us to do? Old things have passed away. All things have become new. And the scripture testifies of that over and over and over. I mean, a few things I want to point out here, that in Yeshua, you have been recreated, you have been made new, and there's some things that we can testify of here, okay? First off, in Yeshua, according to 1 John 2:1, you are forgiven in Messiah Yeshua, and you are accepted. John 1:12 says that you are a child of God. John 15:15 says you are Mashiach's friend. You are a friend to Mashiach. You are a friend to Yeshua. Romans 5:1, I am justified before God, says that you are justified before Yahweh. Ephesians 1:5 says that you are adopted by God. And Colossians 1:4 says you are redeemed and you are forgiven. Colossians 2:10 says that you are complete in Yeshua and you are secure. Romans 8:1 and 2 says you are free from condemnation. Romans 8:28 says all things work for good in your life, those who believe, right? Romans 8:35-39 says you cannot be separated from God's love. 1 John 5:18 says you are born of God and Satan cannot harm you, and he has made you significant in this world. John 15 says that you are a branch of the true vine, and Ephesians 2:10 says that you are God's workmanship. All of things that we can learn to consider in our life moving forward. And 2 Corinthians 4:16 says, so do not lose heart, though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. That's some things that we can learn as we read through this book, Shemot. We see the character of Yahweh, but we see many things going on in the world, some hardships and some things that are happening, right? The plagues, all these things going on. But in the midst of all this, Yahweh delivers his people. He redeems them, brings them to himself, calls his spirit, his presence to be within them, and leads them in his ways. I mean, these are some things that we are learning in our hearts and in our lives as we go through this book this year. Okay, guys, that's all I've got for you today. I pray this has been a blessing for you. I pray this has been encouraging, challenging a little bit even. And if this has been a blessing to you, then please share it. Okay, whatever avenue that you watch or listen to these, please share them, help get them out there. We can only help get it out there so much without you. So it's up to you. If it's blessed you, then share it so it'll bless somebody else, right? And if this has been a blessing, then please consider also making a donation to help us continue making these and being able to put these out there. Okay. So until next time, be blessed and be a blessing. Shalom.